Hey everyone, and welcome to Meat Machine Talks. I am Dean, and I'm resisting not screaming like a fanboy at the moment because the man sat on that side of the screen is someone who I think is just amazing. I'm not trying to big up your ego, but I have played Mortal Kombat to death. That Mortal Kombat. Honestly, I did normally play against you, so I may have, pulled your heart out and stuff. But we'll go past that. But anyway, today's guest is none other than Daniel Pesina, somebody who I guess, regarded in such a high regard as being, a person who has founded a brilliant fighting game. And those who know me well know that fighting games is pretty much my core of what I love through gaming. So, welcome, Daniel. How are you today? You look as youthful as you do on the TV there, and you're just about to uppercut Sub-Zero's head off. Congratulations, well done.
Thanks, Dean. And I just uppercut my own head off. Thank you.
Was it you? Oh, well, there we go. Never mind. Never mind. Yeah. It's 2021. We're rolling over from 2020. Anything's possible, right? So
it actually still feels like 2020 has never ended. Still locked down, and all this craziness is still happening.
Indeed, it certainly is. So before we get started, what I normally do with my guests is just get them to do a brief introduction. I mean, if people don't know who you are, I'd be astonished. But for those who don't know who you are, just a quick 30-second introduction into yourself, what you do, and who you are.
Yeah, I am martial art master Daniel Pesina. I did some stunts for a few movies. One is kind of right up my alley. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Secret of the Ooze. I did martial arts stunts for the Foot Soldiers, and then shortly after that, I did a video game, which turned into a huge franchise that people know as Mortal Kombat. I was Johnny Cage, Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile, Smoke, and eventually Noob Saibot.
I mean, if that doesn't get anyone hyped, I mean, as I said, I'm resisting myself from just going but I'm not going to scream. But honestly, thank you so much for giving me some of your time. I'll give everyone a little bit of a history of how I normally find guests. A lot of it is kind of organic, and I kind of was going through my... I've got a stack of games in this cupboard, basically, and I found a copy of Mortal Kombat, and I was kind of flicking through the back, and I said, I wonder... And I went on Instagram, and I've been following you for a long time, and I found your email address, and I said, do you know what? I'm just going to send you an email. If you don't respond, whatever. If you do, amazing. And I remember I got up, and I saw that email, and I looked at it about 3 times going, my God, he's actually responded. This is amazing. And it kind of came from there. So honestly, thank you so much for giving me your time. So I guess kind of going into kind of present day times, I mean, what have you kind of been doing since lockdown? I mean, it must have been quite difficult for someone as yourself being a martial artist to kind of be locked down. I mean, I'm assuming you're a teacher in your arts. Is that correct?
Yeah. I have the luxury of having work as my passion. I really love the martial arts, and with this lockdown, I actually have time more to practice myself. So I have private students, private clients that I teach. So after that, I find more time to practice. I'm working on a book kind of that mixes martial art philosophy and some of the mysteries of the martial arts, kind of bring them into people's eyes, because a lot of times they're like, oh, you have these secret powers, but in reality, they actually have formulas to get stuff, and it takes a lot of work, but that lot of work makes it look like it's secret. You know what I mean? It's like, holy cow, how did you develop that? Well, you didn't see me do it 2 million times, the technique 2 million times to master that. So I'm crossing that with the actual history as told from outside because of the company. Because I didn't work for Midway. I was John Tobias's friend. And he asked me to do a favor. So often the story, we've got a group of friends together to basically work for real cheap to create Mortal Kombat. So a lot of people don't really hear that story. So hopefully we'll touch a little bit on that.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a perfect segue, actually, because, I mean, I like to do a little bit of deep dive in my guests. I don't like to go completely blind into it. So yeah, I mean, I was aware of the John Tobias story, but for those who don't know, I mean, it would be brilliant to kind of fill in everything that I don't know and anyone else. So, I mean, how I mean, as you said, you kind of was in the Ninja Turtles 2 film. You know, I mean, I guess going before that, I mean, you know, had your martial arts kind of, I mean, obviously you had been practicing for an exceptionally long time. So how did you go from kind of the Turtles film or get the Turtles role into then getting into Mortal Kombat? What was that journey of that path like?
Well, I've always been a martial art geek. I started martial arts in 1969 at a young age. So inspired by Bruce Lee, and there was a video, not video, a TV show, black and white TV series called Charlie Chan the Detective. So this short little Chinese guy would solve these mysteries. And during one time, I saw him do a judo throw, and basically fell in love with the martial arts. And then shortly after that, Bruce Lee came out with the Green Hornet, and then I was really, really intrigued with the martial arts. So when I got a chance to study it, I started studying that. But eventually, through the time, I competed in tournaments, and in being like my older brothers, I have two older brothers, and they had came down with rheumatoid arthritis at a very early age, and they were in a hospital because it's back in the day, like in the early '60s, and their friends basically would give them comic books to read while they're in the hospital, just comic books and Mad Magazine and all these retro things to read while they're sitting in bed, because basically they're trying to get treatment for this disease. So when they were done reading, they would give me the comic books. So I was like collected comic books. I was like a geek who had comic books, and I collect toys, GI Joes, and all this stuff. And then my later on, when my younger brother was around, he just fell in love with comics and would draw, like at my parents' kitchen table. And then when he got a little older, he made some friends, and one of those friends was actually John Tobias. So this is pre MK. And so they would be sometimes drawing at my mother's kitchen table, or sometimes he'd go to a friend's house and they'd draw together, and I'd watch them because it's really cool. That's not a skill that I have. So when I see it, I'm like, holy cow, how can you do that? You know, how much training. I realize and respect that training for artists, all types of artists, to really excel at their art. But anyway, so when I was competing, I was at a local, not a local tournament, an international tournament called Battle of Atlanta, down in Atlanta, Georgia, which is on the southern side of the United States. I'm up north. So I was competing, and there is when they were recruiting martial artists to do a movie. They wouldn't tell us what movie, but they were looking for martial artists to do movies. And at the time, it wasn't like things now. You know, stunt work is a little more difficult. Like we would be getting hit in the face, and we'd have to take like real falls. It was, you know, all that stuff was kind of you had to have a skill already to do it. You know, not a lot of actors, hardly any actors could do their own stunts because they were so not controlled. You know, very, very dangerous. So you had to develop that skill. So I was just on set. I got picked to do foot soldier, to do stunts for a foot soldier, which is it's a little challenging. It's back in the day. So the turtle is a guy with a rubber suit on, neoprene latex suit. So the head is really this big, but the eyeballs, where you can see out of, are about that big. I hope they.
Here's a representation.
Yeah.
There you go.
So the turtle eyes are like this far away, so they can only see directly what is in front of you.
Right.
So when you watch the retro movies, you'll see us kind of like the bad guys going like this. We're looking to move to wherever they're going to kick, because they're just going to throw a kick, and our job is to find the kick and take the kick and make it look real. So when you're doing that, you know, you're bound to get hit. So that's why they were looking for stunt guys at this tournament for that. So, you know, I basically went down and filmed for almost 4 months on a lot in North Carolina. It was really fun. And then shortly after that is when John Tobias called to talk about Mortal Kombat.
I mean, that is amazing. I mean, as you said, I guess it's one of those things where, especially from a stunt person's point of view, people forget you have to know how to fall over, which sounds ridiculous, but if you don't know how to safely fall over, you're going to hurt yourself, right? And that's why I said there's kind of like there's a skill to, you know, taking bumps, as it were. You know, if we use a professional wrestling term, you know, they kind of take professional falls, as it were, on a daily basis, right? And if you don't know how to do that, you're going to hurt yourself. And if you're being impeded visually, that's going to make it very difficult.
Yeah, it is. And again, people, you know, as far as like wrestling, people are like, oh, it's not real. And those guys are real. They're athletes. They take those falls. You can't just go ahead and do that. You'll break your neck.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? You know
absolutely.
what I mean? It is a difficult skill. Two, naturally, they're not hitting each other as hard as they can. They're big guys and they're athletic, but they are taking really brutal blows that would probably cripple a normal person. So
I couldn't
with
agree.
respect to wrestlers, man, it's a tough business. It is a tough business.
But it hasn't affected your looks, so congratulations, you have done good.
Uh,
So yeah, so I mean, obviously, you know, John Tobias gets in touch and says, "Hey, I've got this like cool game that I want to work on. You know, you've kind of got the skills." So, did he tell you anything about like what the game was about, or did he just say, "Hey, you know, like martial arts, this will be cool if you do this"? So how did that kind of approach, and what was his approach when he told you? Because I know some people, when they get people on board, don't give you the full story, just in case, you know, you go off and tell someone, or you know, you get scared or something. So did he kind of like tell you everything that it was going to be, or did he kind of like touch on little bits of what he wanted you to do?
I I think the listeners will find this surprising, but you know, before that, before John got the job at Midway, when he was in college, first year of college, going to art school, he wanted to do uh, a fighting movie for his class project.
Hmm.
So we were actually going to do that with him, and basically we're driving to a location, and two, we're going to do it guerrilla style. We're just going to drive in where there's forest and then shoot. No license or anything like that. And shoot some fight scenes. It was myself, my brother Carlos, who's Raiden, and our friend Rich Divisio, who's Kano, Baraka Quan Chi. So us three and John are driving, and when we go to turn into what looks like a good area to film, a car hits us from behind, and almost it is so close to killing Rich. It's not even funny. But we spun out, and it totaled the car, but none of us were injured. But the equipment was trashed, and there is when I really got to know John, because before he was just my brother's friend. We would go to the movies sometimes and kind of hang out a little bit. But then there we were waiting for the tow truck for like 3 hours because we're way out of the city. And so became friends. Basically, we became friends. So when he called me up, he called me up. He called my parents' house actually. My mom was like, "Hey, John called," and I was like, "I'll call him back later." Because we're just kind of like, he's Carlos's friend. He's not really,
Hmm.
and I was like, he probably wants to know something martial art related or something like that. So I was just like, I'll get into it later. And then the next day, Rich shows up at my door, who's Kano, and he's like, "Hey, John called you." And I was like, "Yeah, I'll call him back later." He goes, "You got to call him back right now." And I was like, "What?" He's like, "You got to call him right now. He's got a project." And I was like, "What kind of project?" And and Rich is like, he won't tell me. He wants to talk to you. So Rich is like, I was like, "Okay, I'll call him." And then so Rich is like, puts his arms up and he's just looking at me. And I'm like, "You want me to call him right now?" And Rich is that type of guy. He's like, "Yeah, call him right now. I got to know." So I called John up, and John's like, "Hey, you went to do Turtles movie, saw that. That's pretty cool. I watched the movie. I've been, I was like, hey, how's your parents? Oh, we're good. But the stuff catching up. And then he's just like, I landed a job making video games for this company called Midway, and we used to go to the arcade sometimes. So I was like coin operated video games, and he's like, yeah, and I was like, sweet, that's a sweet job. And he's like, yeah, thanks, man. And he goes, but I have an idea for a fighting game. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I want to do a live fighting game with real people. And then he was like, can you help me with that? And I was just like, sure. And he's like, can't pay you a lot of money, but whatever you want in the game, I will put into the game. And you can help me create this game, and it's a low budget. We're only going to make 200 cabinets, arcade cabinets, but you can have credit for your future acting and stunt career. You could take all the footage and use it on your reel. And I was like, okay, cool, cool, cool. And so he's like, come to my work, and we'll film some fight scenes, put together some fight scenes, bring Carlos and Rich, put together some fight scenes and some movement, and then I'm going to take that, and I have some drawings I want to show you.
Hmm.
So I was like, okay, I'll stop by for lunch tomorrow. I'll take lunch, because again, I used to work out in the mornings, go to work, and then work out at night. So I had like 2 workouts for martial arts, because when you compete, you got to work out a lot. And so John is like, no, come real late. And I was like, come real late. And he goes, I don't want anyone to know my idea until I just show it, the whole thing. I don't want to release it. And I don't want to spoil the news of it. And I was like, okay, I could totally understand it. You basically don't want other people to kind of steal your idea. You want to get credit for it. And he was like, he didn't say yes, but he was like, so basically the next day I show up I bring Carlos and Rich, and we show up at night, and we go in and we go into this storage room, and we film some martial art stuff. And during this, right before that, John shows us drawings of some characters he has. He has one of a character that's going to be represent Daniel Rad from Iron Fist Kung Fu. He had a Japanese ninja. He had a guy who looked exactly like Rich as Kano. And then he had Raiden, and I think he had a cop, which was Stryker. And he had one more. I can't recall. I think he had one more character drawn out. At least, and he's just showing, and we're like, cool. And we're just talking about like stuff that we can do with this. And we did this tape. And so we chatted for a while about what it is. And then he's like, okay, I'll call you. I'm going to make the pitch, and I'll call you later. And I was like, okay, call me in a couple of days, whenever you make your pitch. So I think about 2 or 3 days later, he calls me up. He's like, they like the idea. He goes, they saw the video, they saw my drawings, they like the idea, they want to hear more about it. And he goes, and I was like, oh, cool. We can pitch like the game to whoever. He goes, like, you're going to meet them, one of the higher ups. He's like, he doesn't own the thing, but he's a manager. You're going to meet the manager, and then just tell him, we're going to just go through of what we've been talking about for the game. So we set up a meeting to have lunch, naturally pizza. And I meet this guy. He's tall, dark hair. They made the introduction, but at that time, I forgot his name. I wasn't paying too much attention, but it was Ed Boon. It wound up to be Ed Boon. And so he was like, didn't say much. He was like, good to meet you. And then he sat down, and he's like, and John was like, well, tell him our ideas. And so we started talking what we wanted to include in it, what John wanted to include in it. John's last game, Total Carnage, had blood in it. So John was like, I want this to have blood in it in the game. And 2, I want have the blood, like first you start off looking regular, and as you battle, you get bruises, you get blood. When you hit, there's blood, and do all this battle damage and things like that. And I was like, cool. I was like, and then we started talking about movies that we like Enter the Dragon, 36 Chambers, 5 Deadly Venoms. That's the name Scorpion, 5 Deadly Venoms, and things like that. And then, we're just talking about different ideas. I told John, we have to change the Japanese ninja. And John is like, what? And I was like, it's the 90s. Everything is Japanese ninjas. And I told him, there's a not very popular version, Chinese ninjas, called the Lin Kuei. And nobody knows about it, and it's mysterious. And I think this will add to the game, this mystery to the game. And he's like, what? And so I told him about this book that I had, and I told him, if you want me to work on it, I really want the Lin Kuei in it. So if you don't put the Lin Kuei in it, I can't really work with you, because you're not taking any of my ideas. So basically, he was like, okay, I'll change the Japanese ninjas, and this is what they look like now, at my request. So yeah, and then the Lin Kuei lore, he threw that in there again, because that's one of the things with helping create the game, was having that in there. And then when we were about to leave, I looked at Ed, and I was like, Ed, what do you think? And Ed just gave me that kind of tight lip and kind of like that. And I was like, I just thought, oh crap, he didn't like it.
Mm.
And about 3 days later, John calls me up and says, our game is canceled. They like the idea of a fighting game, but they're going to go with an idea that we're going to have Jean-Claude Van Damme do a regular fighting game. He's like, John described it as a mainstream fighting game, like Karate Fighter, where Jean-Claude Van Damme walks around and kicks everybody's ass. And John was like, and then John was like, sorry, man, it just didn't work out. And I was like, man, that sucks. And I was just like, I was so worried that they would take the Lin Kuei and put that in Jean-Claude Van Damme's game, because that's like my idea. And I wanted to be on board the first time, you know, in a production, having the Lin Kuei in there. And I was like, crap, man, oh man. And so I would say about 3 months later, maybe shorter, so let's just say a while later, he calls me up. And he's like, Book, because we call each other Book. He's like, Book, guess what? What? They found out that Jean-Claude Van Damme wants actual money to be in the game. That he won't just do it for just a percentage. And then we start laughing, and then he's like, but they want us to do our fighting game. He goes, you still on board to help me do it? And I was like, yeah, let's do it, you know? And so then John and I was like, okay, what do we do? He goes, what do we do? And his direct words were, we need to create a pathway to the game. And I was like, what? He goes, he's like, we just got to film everything you can possibly do, that what you think we're going to need for this fighting game, to create a fighting game. So I showed up, and for the 5 or 6 days, 8 hours a day, John and I went through martial art moves, looking at videos. And two, it wasn't just like, you know, John put me in front of the camera and he's like, okay, punch to the face. So when I would punch, I would you could see this punch like this. And then he's like, change it a little bit. So I would go like this and punch like this, and then turn it over, punch like this. You know what I mean? Try a punch like straight like this. Try this, try this, try this. We were just trying different things and looking at it. And then we noticed, like, oh, this looks like that, like a punch. Like if you do this type of action and this type of action in that realm, they look the same. Yeah, just the way it was going to look. It was going to look the same just because of the quality of the video. And the video camera was owned by John's dad. It wasn't even like a company video camera. You know, John had to ask permission for his dad to use his video camera to create more. It's just so low budget. And so we were just going through stuff and trying to just figure out how to basically make the game. And so once we had about the 6th day, about flipping 50 hours and bruises, and, you know, we didn't have mats, so I would do falling on concrete because we didn't have mats. I finally told John, I was like, John, if we're going to have these other guys in, you know, you can't ask them to land on concrete. You know what I mean? You're already working pretty cheap, basically just getting an hourly. They're going to be helping create this game, and you can't expect them to fall on concrete. So John was like, I'll find a mat. You know, I'll dig out a mat and we'll find some safety for them. And I was like, cool, because it was just, you know, you're doing this all day on a cement floor. It's hard on the back, you know. And the whole thing was, he wouldn't just do one punch. The thing was, I kept doing it maybe 20, 30 times, you know, and eventually we were like looking at it. And then John was like, you know what? Instead of always coming back to take a look, do it 3 times, then change it some way. Just add something. And so I would just throw a punch, and I might add my hand here for the punch, or I might change like a little bit of this punch, or kind of just, and then put the hand here and put the hand punch like this, and have like this punch like this. So we were just doing that for punches, strikes, kicks, jumps, everything, you know, just trying to find like the right thing. And finally after about 6 days, John was like, I think we can figure this out. He's like, what we need to do is we need to bring the programmer in to take a look at what we have. And then he'll explain better than me. He goes, but there's hitboxes in the game. So we have to do stuff. When you do your technique, you have to do it in a way he can make it do what we want to do. So then we invited Ed to come in to take a look at what we had and to make adjustments of different things of what we had. We were like, hey, how do we do this? Hey, how do we do that? So at the beginning, it was more, I think, looking back, in my opinion, it was vision. Like they didn't really see the vision yet. The company didn't see the vision yet, John's vision. Not even Ed saw John's vision because he was rarely around. He would just come in and be like, oh, this is what I need, and he'd leave. And then, after they tested it, then pretty much everybody wanted a piece of it. Once they started getting going, it was like, holy cow, this is really cool. Yeah, but yeah, so that's basically how we started to make the game.
I mean, that is amazing to hear some of the background, because I think part of the problem is, I mean, I've seen the video footage. I think it's readily available on YouTube of yourself and a few of the other actors. I think you're against like a concrete wall. There's like a square of tape on the floor where it's obviously your boundary you're meant to work in at a height level. And seeing the amount of, as you said, the amount of kicks you're having to do, the amount of punches. There was one bit where you're on like was it some steps to do like the flying kicks, and you're kind of like having to hold it and balance yourself and stuff. The level of commitment that you guys had to put in, I think, is exceptional, and it does come out in the final product, because I mean, when I first saw the game, I was just like, whoa, because it was nothing like anything you'd seen before, right? It was so like, whoa, okay, this is impressive, But as you said, the fact that it was caught on a borrowed video recorder makes it that much more hilarious, because I think, and I've said this before in some of my other podcasts, where I think sometimes when you have a limited amount of resource, your level of creativity almost trebles, because you have to work harder to get to that level. Because, making that nowadays, and obviously this is not taken away from the times of the period, is relatively simple. You pop up a green screen, you take a couple of pictures, you key it out, it's done. Doing that back then, very difficult.
There was no such thing as Photoshop then, so you couldn't cut that out. You had to take a little tool and click that out. It would take you like hours to cut out one character for one movement. Two, when we started, after 2 days, I came into work and John was like, you know what? We can't use any of that footage. And I was like, what? And then he goes, look at this. And I was looking at it. I was like, okay. He's like, no, this is not a movie. He goes, so every time you come closer to the camera, it looks different than when you're further away from the camera. And I was just like, oh my God. I go, we got to mark the floor. And John was like, yeah, we got to mark the floor. So I put these really little marks on it, and I'm standing on it, and I'm doing stuff on it, and I can't come back to the same place. And then John is like, your marks, you got to make them bigger. So all of a sudden, I made them these little square things to put my feet in, and then I'm doing my movement. And I was like, John, because it was only overhead lighting at the time. Then later on, we would add more lights, but there was only overhead lighting. And I was like, John, how far can I go forward? And before my kick, when I extend my kick, changes color, it goes dimmer. And John's like, oh crap, we got to mark that. And so he was like, go ahead. And I'd slowly inch forward, and then I put a piece of tape on, and I slowly inch back, and then we put another piece of tape on. So then I had a square, and then I'm moving for that. And then I realized, then I'm like, how do I know? I go, it's easier to track the center if we make a long piece of tape. And so John's like, good idea. And then John was like, you know what, too? I'm going to mark how high your head is. So getting it comfortable where you can work all day. So not too low. So because you got to be in that stance like all day long and always return to that stance. And then we marked that. We got it down. We come in the next day and somebody picked up all the tape.
Oh my God.
So we had to erase all the footage we had from finally getting it together and start all over, because all the taping won't match without that.
Oh.
We did that again, and then they did that for a second time. And then the second time they did that, John was like really mad, because he's like, oh my God, we're losing so much time. We got to get this thing done in 8 months. This is going to take forever. And he calls Ed up and he's bitching, and Ed's like, don't worry, I'll take care of it. And then so Ed made his calls and made sure that nobody picked up the tape that we made, and that was like on the 4th day. And so then after that, we got 3 solid days of filming stuff. And then that's when we're like, Ed, come in, take a look and see what we got. And it was like, yeah, I kind of looked at your footage. It looks pretty good, but this is what I need. He goes, I need bigger extension. than you guys had, because at the beginning we're throwing a hook punch like this, but when you look at it, it looks boring. So then we're like, how far do I need to go to make this technique look really cool? And that itself takes a long time, a lot of repetitions, you know. So we were just doing all this stuff, and two, because it was so low budget, John is erasing everything we didn't need. So right now, when you look at YouTube, that all the footage on YouTube is 7 days, about 60 hours later. It's not the original. It is the original, but it's not the original creation.
See, I totally get you.
Yeah, how we actually created it, because we didn't know, we were only doing 200 cabinets. You know? So we never. John was like, no, there's one tape for Hollywood guy. There's one tape for. I think Kano already had a name. Raiden already had a name for sure. But even like we used to call Raiden Hathead. You know, because it was Raiden. He did it after Raiden, but he wasn't sure what the name was going to be, because he modeled it after the Japanese thunder god. But he didn't know if we could really do that. So we used to call him Hathead. You know, this tape was for Head. This is for that, and this is for the ninja. You know, even though we created Lin Kuei, we still use like ninja as the thing. But so we erased all that stuff. All that stuff will never ever be seen. That's gone forever.
Wow.
Yeah.
But it lives on with you in those stories, and I mean that's why I'm so honored to even have you on the podcast, because I think one thing that I guess in my youth, you know, playing the game, you take one look at the game. Oh, there's your name. Actually, is Johnny Cage. There you go. I timed that one well. You know, looking at the game, you wouldn't really think, you know, it was, with the greatest of respects, a low budgeted game.
It was.
Yeah, but when you look at the final product, I mean, that's particularly the arcade version running. And I mean, I remember walking past the arcade cabinet as a kid and being absolutely blown away by what I was seeing. But there is a question I wanted to ask, which is around the costumes. Whose idea kind of came up with, you know, how each character looked?
John Tobias.
Wow.
Has good his vision. It's his. You know, for as far as myself, Rich, especially Rich, like Ed programmed the game and stuff like that, and he co-created it in that way. And the martial art movement and stuff, things like that you see in the game, I co-created that with John. And Rich helped me with a lot of things. Like Rich came up with "Get Over Here." That's Rich actually came up with that idea.
About that.
Get over here. So a lot of and every of the characters that were in the first game modeled those, took their selves and put them in the character. So when you see Johnny Cage, that's part of my personality that's in there. And when we were goofing around and doing stuff, all that stuff came into the lore. Same thing with Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Parts of my personality got put in there because it's just easier to act like yourself than somebody else. You know what I mean? Otherwise, need a script. There was no script. There was not even like, oh, I need you to do this. It was like, oh, that's cool. Do that again. You know what I mean? Like falling. I fell on concrete like 50 different ways, hundreds of times. And finally, I was like, kept looking at it. I'm like, no, it really doesn't look, because the 2D, doesn't look good. And I tried to do different things. And finally, I was like, you know what? I got an idea. I'm going to do that. I got an idea, Johnny. He's like, okay, let's go. Let's see it. And so then I just flipped up, my feet up in the air, and hit the ground. He's like, that's it. He's like, that's the one. And so I did that a few times, and then every character does that. It was just, and that's what he meant, my pathway of the game. Creating the stuff that each of us can use, that one person does, that each of us can use, and then we would insert our own personality techniques into it. You know, the special moves. But John was like, what do you got in your closet? And it's the 90s. And he's like, you got any biker shorts? He goes, he goes, Ed really wants this guy to have some satire with Jean-Claude Van Damme. And, you know, I like Jean-Claude Van Damme, but I was like, I'm not going to do Jean-Claude Van Damme. He goes, if you do this for me, we'll buy you pizza every night. So and he goes, you don't have to really be Jean-Claude Van Damme, but we're just going to stick some Jean-Claude Van Damme moves in there. You know, because I really am a fan of Iron Fist, of Daniel Rad and Iron Fist. So that's who Jean-Claude Johnny Cage is really modeled after. And we only threw a little bit of Jean-Claude Van Damme stuff in there to appease Ed because he turned down Ed's idea of that game. So we kind of stuck that in there for that. But almost everything you see in number one came from our closets. There was little pieces that came from, John and I went to the local martial arts shop to buy some pieces. Like Raiden's uniform is a Taekwondo uniform that we got. Kano, got a karate uniform. The Lin Kuei, John actually made this part and changed it to yellow because black we couldn't really catch good against that. There's no Photoshop either. So against the background, you couldn't tell, where the waist was or anything like that. So it was too dark. So we gave it color. But basically, yeah, Tobias really had the vision. As I said, he's the creator, and all of us not all of us, but most of the cast and people from number one can say that we co-created it.
I mean, it's just a fascinating story, and I love hearing stories like this because it just shows, even from you talking about it after all of these years that have gone past, the level of passion that you have still translates through, and that almost makes me so happy inside. I mean, I haven't stopped smiling since this entire podcast because even hearing this, I kind of cast my mind back to what that must have been like being in this room with bits of tape on the floor and you performing these moves, and you don't know what the end result's going to be, but I mean, we can all agree it's amazing. So one thing I was going to quickly ask is the rope dart. Obviously, you're incredibly talented at using that. Was it your idea to give that to Scorpion?
Yes, it was my originally. Okay, so the way it went was Johnny Cage was the father of all the characters. We worked on him for, I would think 3 months, and even then we would come up with ideas and come back and film stuff because we were like, I want to do this. Oh, I got to make a response for that, or we got to do this. Oh yeah, I forgot to do that, and so we came back and forth. The filming wasn't just, okay, you're done. Yeah. We would come back and forth until we would be goofing around and the rivalry. But there's a lot of stories. There's a really lot of stories. Like why there's a rivalry between Scorpion and Sub-Zero. There's a whole goofing around story that gave how that lore came into birth. But anyway, so it was Johnny Cage, Kano, Raiden, and then Scorpion, the ninja. He didn't have a name yet, but later on they gave him Scorpion. I think 5 Deadly Venoms. I think, but during that time, the game is almost done because there's only going to be 2 more characters ready to go, and John is like, hey, today Ed wants to come in and give some ideas for the game, and I was just like, I didn't really know Ed because I didn't see him a lot. He would just come in and say, this is what he was like, oh, I saw this. He goes, you need to do this. If it's too close, I can't use it. He would be making that's his thing. Oh, I can't do anything with this. You have to reshoot this or, that. And John's like, he's like, well, one, he thinks you're doing a really good job. He thinks this game is really cool. And so I was like, oh, okay. Well, what is that idea? Does he have good ideas? Because till then, I was like the martial art guy, and any martial art idea would be passed through me.
Sure.
I'd be like, oh, we can use that because I already had the experience of knowing what worked and what wouldn't work because I already tried to do everything. So like everybody's like, oh, I want to do this kick. And I was like, you can't do that kick because that kick will look exactly like this kick. And if we film it, we're going to be wasting a half an hour filming something that it's not going to look good because we already tried that. So John was like, well, we kind of have to listen to him because he's the boss. And then I was like, oh, I go, well, he's the boss of you. He's not the boss of me. And I think that might have translated not well, but and then so Ed comes in and he's like, you know what I want you to do? I want you to have a lasso, go like this, throw it around the guy, tie the guy up, and then go up to him and you get like a free punching. And then I looked at him like, Ed, I am not Wonder Woman. I am not going to do that move. Ed was kind of just shocked. And then John, I could see John getting mad at me because John is like, well, boss, you're not supposed to be doing that to the boss because that's the boss is the boss. But and then I was like, just like, but I have a rope dart. He's like, a rope dart. So I pulled out a rope dart and I showed him how to use that. And, I'm swinging it around. And then one time when I threw it out, I was like, this used to pull horsemen originally off of horses, really long rope. Later on, they made the rope a little bit smaller, like 10 feet to make it like a personal weapon. But in the military times, the rope was really, and you'd wrap it around your body to get centrifugal force, and then you throw it out and then pull the guy off the horse. And so I showed him, and when I'm doing this movement, and as I'm pulling it back, Rich is like, "Get over here!" And then he like that. And so for me, every time I hear "Get over here," I remember how Rich, as Kano in his Kano voice, did that. So even I think in the game, it sounds kind of like Kano, at least for me. Whenever I hear Ed do it, it's like, oh, it just brings me back to like Rich and goofing around and that whole story of me doing that. And then John is like, when John saw the movement, he's like, and I was doing it, and Ed was like, holy cow. And he's like, no, that's really cool. And so Ed was cool. He was like, yeah, that's cool. We should put that in the game. So in the end, it was like that. And then later on, he was like, you know what I think is going to be cool if I have him appear here, and then all of a sudden he just appears over here. And I was like, oh, that'd be cool. And so that's actually Ed's idea, is to have one appear here and then one appear on the other side.
That's so cool. So cool. I mean, I always wondered how that had come about, because I mean, obviously having as you said, a Chinese ninja, and then you kind of got your rope dart, and then to get over here, I was like, how does all this piece together? Now I get it. But that is a brilliant story. Thank you very much for telling me that. That's amazing.
And I think that's why right now Scorpion is like the representative MK.
Sure.
Because that's the first time that Ed got to actually, not besides the coding and the adjustments, that's his first time he got to create something for the game, which is special to him. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Special to the guys. Yeah.
Well, I assume it's the mascot of NetherRealm, right? So there you go.
Yeah.
I mean that's a fantastic story. One thing I wanted to ask was, obviously once you had completed it, and we kind of were coming headstrong into Mortal Monday, right, which was the big release. What was everybody's feeling? Was it like, yeah, this is going to be all right, this is going to do okay? What was kind of everyone's feelings once everything had been completed and it was kind of pushed out to the public?
Well, first thing is the 200 arcade cabinets quickly turned into 10,000 pre-order.
Wow.
So that's like that, and that's part of the story that like just our friends out there listening to should get a grip on. It's like, when they were going to do 10,000, I was like, John, when we agreed to it, you told me we're going to do 200. And two, I told John and Ed, if you do 201 and give me a game, you can create as many as you want. And John and Ed were like, no, we're not going to create more than 200. And those games are too expensive. We're not going to give you one. And I was like, okay. So then when they were going to they pre-ordered 10,000 cabinets, I was like, John, you said 200. You said 200. And if you would have just gave me that one, we wouldn't be having this conversation. And John's like, don't worry. I know the upper management messed up. We're going to give you a bonus. Don't worry. We're going to give you a bonus. Then we got the news that it's going to go into the home version. And then I'm like, John, you didn't say anything about home. And then John's like, don't worry. We'll give you another bonus from that. They're going to make so much money. You're going to get some money. Don't worry about that. So at that point of testing and stuff like that, it was already rocking. There was lines, as there's lines to play the arcade cabinets. There was, people were putting their jackets over their hands so you couldn't see them performing the fatalities and special moves. Everything was really just.
I remember that.
Yeah, what I mean. Before it went home, it was already, people were just waiting for it. So with Mortal Monday, when they bought the rights and they wanted us to appear at a trade show, John was like, oh, you want to, will you appear at a trade show? These guys want you to appear at a trade show. And I was like, okay. And he goes, but, we can't work for what we work for you. You're a friend. We work cheap. This is a company. They got money. They got to pay us properly. And John was like, got it. And so we got an agreement and got paid pretty good. They wanted us to stay 2 hours. Um, so we were signing autographs, and people come in and sign autographs, and somebody wanted to take a picture with me. Say, can I take a picture with you? And they got by the table, but then I jumped up on the table, and then I strike a martial art pose, and all of a sudden, it just went crazy. Everybody is like, oh, taking pictures. Oh, can I take a pictures of you? Because we're martial artists. So, and two, we're kung fu. So it's not like just like a boxing pose. We're doing all these crazy, cool Wu-Tang Clan poses, martial art poses, looking like that, and posing people. Because we're martial artists, I would be posing people like this, or being like, oh, they make a fist, and I'm like, oh no, you got to make a fist like this and make your wrist is straight. You can't go take a picture like that. That's one of my quirks. Is when I see martial artists and their wrist is bent, I'm like, oh, they've never used their martial art. You got to make that wrist flat. So anyway, so we were doing that, and they really went nuts, and we wound up signing autographs for 8 hours.
Whoa!
So they hired us for 2 hours, and then I negotiated to get. I was like, no, we already said 2 hours. We can't let you go for the same price, because we all have commitments. I got to drop what I was going to do afterwards to sign more autographs. You got to pay more, and they were like, okay, So again, that turned out well. And you have a flavor of that going on, and then I'm like, oh man, I can't wait to get my bonus, because it's going to be, these guys are paying this for creating it. I'm going to get something huge. You know what I mean? I'm going to be able to maybe like buy a car or something like that. I was thinking, oh man, I'm going to do all this stuff. So Mortal Monday came, and we got invited to go out to London. I went to London. I went to Manchester, and couple other places. We drove around England just promoting the game. It's cool.
It's funny you mention that, because I spotted a video that I retweeted, I think today, and I think you posted it not long ago, and it's of my gaming arch nemesis, Big Boy Barry, because you were actually on his show. He is my arch nemesis, and in fact, I'll tell you what, wait there a minute. I had waited 30 years to get my revenge against him. And last year, well, not last year, the year before, there is a picture of me and Alex together. So years ago, I was on a TV show, and he was the only one who beat me at a game. So for 27 years, I'd been holding a grudge that I had never beaten him at a game, and then I met up with him and absolutely destroyed him. So there's your happy story. But I did not know that you had met him, and I found that really hilarious, because I was just randomly, I was kind of doing a bit of research, and I went through your Twitter feed, and I went, no. I was like, I'm trying to get away from this guy, and everywhere I go, I still see his face like some sort of mortal enemy, So maybe what we need to do is put me and Big Boy Barry into there, and we can have a Mortal Kombat fight. But that's another conversation for another day. But yeah, I found that amazing, because then obviously that kind of goes back to, as you said, the promotion of you being around. Being on a variety of different shows. I think you were on Games Master, if I remember rightly. I think you played against forgive me for not knowing her name, Sonya Blade, actress. So yeah, it's just amazing to call back all those memories of that big promotion, because I remember when it came out, and my family had a Commodore Amiga at the time, so there was Mortal Kombat for the Amiga, which isn't the best version. But I remember playing it and being like, whoa, this is amazing. And then sitting in the arcade going, no, this is amazing. Like, this is the version. And then once I found out it was coming out to, like, home consoles, I was like, yeah, okay, yeah, I'm a happy boy now. This is going to be good. But the one thing I do remember, and I think this kind of comes back to something else, was you were on the face of Time magazine. Am I correct there?
Yes, I am. Myself and Kano.
Yes, that was right.
Yeah, we made the cover of Time magazine because, again, it's the controversy of violence in video games, which I personally think that it's just a scapegoat for politicians not willing to do their job, because it's easier to complain than find a way to fix things or help out. It's easier to pitch, oh, that's the problem, and it's not that. And instead, find a way to do that. Everybody should. Now I'm getting into politics. Everybody should make a living wage. Everybody should make a living wage, and a wage where they can work and give their hardest work to, but after work, enjoy their life, because life is meant to be enjoyed. I
totally agree. And I think I think the one thing, and I guess, I mean, to try and give my aspect of what was happening back there, I kind of lean, and I don't know how this comment's going to go down well, but I always lean towards the parents, right? And I worked for a period of time in a computer game store here in the UK for about 5.5 years, and there were games such as Mortal Kombat, such as Grand Theft Auto. The list is endless of 18 rated games with gore, violence. Manhunt is another perfect example.
And I love men.
Yeah, I do too. But I distinctly remember parents bringing up copies of Manhunt, GTA, insert a game that's 18 rated. And I almost had this internal self-conflict where I was like, is it my job to tell the parent this is an 18 rated game for your 10-year-old? Or should they already be aware of that? So I did used to go out of my way and be like, this is an 18 rated game. And 9 times out of 10, the response would be, oh, well, it's nothing worse than they've already seen on TV. Which then, I then went back and said, well, okay, Mortal Monday was kind of, such a groundbreaking thing. Mortal Kombat had come out. And then obviously the positive press followed by, obviously, the negative connotations, as we said, the violence. But I kind of looked at some of the other games that were around at the time. If you go back through history before Mortal Kombat, there were some incredibly violent games. But I think because Mortal Kombat had such a following and there was so much drive and hype behind it, everybody's eyes were on it, right? And the moment somebody had something to say that was negative against it, I think they just latched onto it like a rope dart, pulled it in, and then, sorry to use that, it just came to my mind, and then tried to, try and bring it down for what it was. And I think it, the first time you see Kano kind of go in and rip someone's heart out, even I was like, whoa, that's intense. But then you remember, like, it's a game, right? It's not like when you were filming it, he actually ripped your heart out. No, it is a game. It is pixels on a screen. I mean, you're doing very well for someone who hasn't got a heart or a head, or a spine, depending on which fatality you go for. So, again, it's one of those things where I think because it became so popular, there has to be some mitigation as a parent, I would say, to be that buffer. If you see it as being a perfectly fine thing, go ahead with it. If you don't, you go ahead with it. But I was shocked that the amount of parents who, for instance, if it was an 18 rated film, wouldn't let them watch it, but an 18 rated game they would. So coming back to kind of what happened with the controversy, I was like, well, the same thing applies, right? There was a lot of, how many kids at that time had probably already seen films like The Exorcist, which, in my opinion, was probably a lot more mentally disturbing than that. So, it's a discussion point that I find fascinating, because I always find that video games seem to be this instant scapegoat because it's an interactive experience, but there are plenty of other things. I mean, literature can be incredibly damaging. And to some extent, it could be actually worse, because in some cases you're having to be creative in the mind, which can lead to other things. So it was funny because I did a lot of research into Mortal Monday and kind of the fallout from that. But it must have been pretty cool to be on the front of Time magazine.
Yeah.
And have your face on the side of the cabinet as well, and be like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah. It does not suck. As far as like the side of the cabinet, originally they were going to have like a dragon, and John came up to me like the day before they're going to make art. He's like, hey, what are you doing tomorrow? And I was like, I don't know why. And he's like, you helped me create this game and I want to show thanks. I want to put you on the side of the game. And then I was like, what? And he's like, I want you to come tomorrow and take pictures, and I want to put you on the side of the game. I couldn't have done this without you. And this is my way of thanking you for doing this for me. And I was like, wow, okay. I was like, okay, I'll come down. So the next day I went down and took some pictures, and I'm on the side of the game. So yeah, it's I can't believe it. Even to this day, it's kind of like, wow.
But I'm just as shocked as you are, because like I said, like I remember vividly seeing your face on the cabinet in the game, and then to be talking to you now, for me, is just like it's a very surreal experience. But again, it's really nice to hear these stories, because I think part of the problem is with a lot of games is people don't hear the the struggles, the hard effort, the dedication, the limitations, you know, and the things that people have to go through to produce a masterpiece as that. Now, I mean, this game's what, over 20 years old, I think, if I remember rightly.
27, 28,
Yeah,
probably, yeah, probably over 28 years old.
and it still looks awesome. Just as Raiden pops someone's head off, it still looks awesome, you know. And that's the thing I think that's testament to it is I think the level of creativity that's gone into it has really driven such a kind of a following behind it. I mean, the one thing for me with Mortal Kombat was the storyline. You know, there were lots of other kind of, you know, fighting games that kind of have, oh, here's a bad person, you need to beat this guy, and that's it. But each, as you said, each individual character kind of has this lore, this story behind them that's carried all the way through with every single version of Mortal Kombat. And I just find that amazing because, you know, with each installment of the game that comes out, you wanting to know more, you want to know more about that story, right? And, you know, as I said, there's so many synonymous things with the game that have come through. I mean, you know, we were talking about the rope dart, the coloration of the characters, you know, the phrasings that is used, and to think that it stemmed from that, and it's
Yeah,
still that important as a game, incredible work, absolutely
yeah,
incredible.
yeah. Like too, a lot of like Liz, Sonia. When I asked her, to, you know, I created the kiss of death. I was like, oh, you got to do a kiss of death where you go like this and you blow and it looks like a butterfly and it hits you and you blow up. And then she looked at me and she's like, I don't want to do that. Why do I have to kill somebody? Why can't I just be their friend? Why can't I just give them a flower? And that we all laugh, but then in Mortal Kombat 2, somebody's giving a flower and then we have friendships.
Yeah.
And that's because Sonia created that,
Ah,
you know, things like what we wanted tag teams in the first game. We wanted 3 fatality. Each personality had 3 fatalities. You know, Johnny Cage's first ever fatality was I was going to punch a hole in your skull, and when you looked at the camera, you had a round thing out. And I understand they have that now,
yeah.
but that was the first game. And then my second fatality was brutalized a person to just bah, 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 and he's just helpless and taking the beating, and then I punch his head off. And then we filmed that, and John was like, "That's a little complicated." He goes, "Because I'm going to have to cut out every frame and do this. It's going to that will take a while. What do you want?" And I was just like, you know, there's a guy Matsuyama who used to chop horns off of a bull. You know what I mean? With one
Mm,
blow, a deadly breaking force. And I was like, "Ooh, it'd be so cool to uppercut somebody, their head goes flying off. That's how powerful it is." And Don's like, "Okay, I could probably do that." And so, you know, all this stuff was just like trying to just discover this stuff, you know. And again, you know, Carlos really loving Big Trouble in Little China, adding elements of that into Raiden. Sonia wanted to really use her back bend thing. And then when Ed was watching it, he's like, "You know, it would be cool if she grabbed you with it and then flipped you over like that." And so all of a sudden she has that. And that the first game was really a big collaboration with Tobias being the lead. You know, creating the story like him, my friend Andy Kadulka, who went on later on to draw the Nintendo pamphlets, all that artwork in Nintendo is actually, I have a couple pieces of his original drawings of that Nintendo stuff um, here. But him and John sat at at his mom's kitchen table, and we kitchen table creating the first Mortal Kombat comic book that you used to send in to get.
mm.
And at that table, we already had like some of the background story from goofing around. But while he was drawing that, he actually created the whole lore just in those 3 days. And they stayed up for 3 days straight trying to get this comic book done. But he came up with the whole story like that.
I've actually got a copy of that. I remember when I was a kid, I think I was with my mother. I think we walked into like a small store here in the UK, and I was just kind of like randomly looking through because back then like gaming magazines were the thing, right? And I remember sort of going through, and all I saw was the dragon of the Mortal Kombat logo, and my eyes just suddenly went, "What's that?" And I was just like, "It's a comic." And my mum was like, "What was that?" I was like, "Oh, I don't know. It's just like some gaming book." She was just like, "Yeah, cool, whatever." And I literally got home and I couldn't stop reading it. Genuinely, like I've got it somewhere. If I find it, I'll take a picture and tag you on Twitter with it. But genuinely, like I read that thing. I think I'm surprised it didn't actually have burn holes in it with how many times I kept reading that thing, because I was just so, as you said, the art style was so unique, and when you tied that into the story and everything else, it just, and then after playing the game, it everything complemented itself, and I think that was the really cool thing, is there wasn't any blurred lines. Everything just kind of, the comic worked with the game, which worked with this, which worked with that. Everything just kind of slotted in and worked beautifully together.
Yeah, he really too. When we were thinking about the early days of Mortal Kombat, we wanted the game to actually look like Dragon Slayer,
Right.
that smooth thing. And then also when we were us as a group, John, my brother, and Rich, and some other friends, Andy, went to see that Ralph Bakshi movie of Lord of the Rings with the rotoscoping in.
Mm.
So originally we wanted the characters to kind of look like that, to look real, but drawn over like that. But again, the technology and just the budget didn't allow it, and it came out looking like what it is today, and that turned out perfect.
Yeah, I come from an animation. Well, I studied animation at university, and even doing rotoscoping back then was difficult. Using these, amazingly powerful computers that we have now, it's very easy. Yeah, I can do this. I can do this animation in no time. But even back then, like to have to individually draw everything else out and then rotoscope over the top of that, it's still very difficult. So to even think of doing that all the way back then, again, it's I think when you look at Mortal Kombat as a core, if you strip away everything, you just had the right creative minds working together in one direction. And I think that's probably testament to most projects. I think when everybody's pulling in the same direction, the journey becomes easy in terms of pushing in the right place. It doesn't mean that the journey is easy, because obviously there are limitations in everything that you get. But I think if everybody's going in that same direction, the creativity, the help, the drive, which I think is important. I think that's one of the issues that you find nowadays in the gaming industry, is that sometimes there isn't that commitment, and someone may have a completely different creative view, and that can cause a problem, and then a game gets delayed and so on and so forth. But I'm sure there probably were creative differences, but it was for the right reason. Oh no, okay, all right. But again,
like I said before, there wasn't really creative differences, because everybody, John was the creator, and he took the best ideas. Like when I overrode Ed on what he wanted, and then he saw what I wanted, John was like, I want that. And Ed didn't argue. And two, I think it was two, because we weren't really part of Midway, Ed being the boss. And actually the boss gets credit for everybody's work. You know how it is.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, you do work and your boss gets credit. And that's the whole thing with Mortal Kombat. Ed he did help create the game, and he's a co-creator, but I think a lot of people don't really see, no offense, that John was really the creator. Yeah. And John, and two, us being friends with John, we didn't really I never really listened to Ed, as a part to adjusting.
True.
Ed would say, if you don't do it this, you need to do it this way. And I knew I have to find a way to do it this way, because it won't work if I don't do that. But really, ideas, he didn't really, for the first game, he really didn't have like many ideas other than the adjustment. And the storyline and stuff like that was completely Tobias's, the whole vision. Sure. And again, the company said no. Ed said no to the first round of Mortal Kombat. So, you know what I mean? They didn't really see that vision. I was just like, man, these guys, why did they say no? This could be such a good game. You know what I mean? This is going to be, because we know martial arts, and I know John is a great artist, and he's got good vision, very creative. I was like, man, they just don't see it. Yeah. But after we filmed for a while, I would had people when I was working there who I didn't even know, and they're like, Danny, man, you kick ass. That's like good movement. We watch some videos of you. They're like, and I'm like, and then John would be like, oh, that's a game designer. Oh, that's a programmer, programmer, game designer, because they used to wear the same hats. Oh, that's an artist. Oh, hey, come meet the guy who's making the music. And then, I come in and meet Dan Ford, and Dan Ford's like, oh my God, you're so cool. I saw you doing some moves and stuff like that. Man, you're awesome. And I was like, thanks, Dan. And plus, you're Dan and I'm Dan. We're both the same. And we kind of, you know what I mean? Everybody was just like, once they saw the vision, the whole company really were behind us. But it did take an effort for them to see the vision. And not to take any credit away from anybody, because there's like people who designed the programs. The programmers all share bits of programming
Hmm.
to get the game done. So programming for Mortal Kombat came from other games. You know, oh, I need this beat, I need this piece, and they, you know, and Ed kind of put it together to do that. So all those guys didn't get really credit. And they deserve credit for that.
Well,
So,
I
you
think you
know,
touched on a great point, because I mean, some of the other points with Mortal Kombat is it's not just the characters or the animations, but it's actually the environments as well, right? So each environment you fight in is so unique from one another. You know, there are other beat 'em ups or fighting games that I can think of where the environments that you fight in almost look identical to some degree. It just looks like, hey, instead of this dojo, you're in this dojo. Whereas this, you know, you one minute you're in an underground lair, the next minute you're fighting in front of, you know, monks. You know, the next minute you're in front of Shang Tsung. You know, there's so many. It adds to the layer, you know, and you know, obviously not to take away from the amazing artistic animations that you guys have produced, but without that graphical environment to fight in, it just adds a complete different layer to it as well. So, as you said, it's one of those things where I think there are individuals in the industry who maybe don't get the swan song as they deserve, because obviously, you know, the front person, as you said, is kind of like the horn blower. Here I am, and the guy at the back's like, yeah, if it wasn't for me doing that bit of code, it wouldn't have worked. You know, it's like it's that kind of thing, right? And I guess
yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of ties me into I guess more of the. I mean, we spoke about this before we came on the air. Kind of the I guess the issues that you've had in your alternative MK journey, as it were, which did lead to some other projects, as far as I'm aware, in terms of other fighting games as well. Is that correct in my assumption?
well, yeah. Well, Hosung came up with some fighting games. Uh, uh, you know, after Hosung is Liu Kang, he he uh, he went and wanted to do like fighting games. So I helped him like on a couple of fighting games, and naturally for the Jaguar system that got crushed by Nintendo and Sony
That's
later
right.
on.
I've got one set up there.
Yeah, during of course I did a couple of that, and then I did like a Mortal Kombat. Like a little unknown story is I did ads for Bloodstorm, and the guy who created Bloodstorm actually helped us do background art for MK2.
Ah, interesting.
So yeah, so what happened was this guy Leaf called John up, and John was like, he called John up, and John's like, hey, Leaf called me up, and I was like, Leaf, the guy who does backgrounds? He goes, yeah, he got a new job. He left. And I was like, good for him, man. I hope he's getting paid. We sure aren't. And he's like, he wants you to help him with an ad. And I was like, well, help him with the ad. Yeah, he wants you to be Johnny for you. And everybody knows you as Johnny Cage to help him promote his thing. And then I was like, can I do that? And Johnny's like, well, we don't own the rights to you, so you can do that. But you know what? Come in and we're going to have a meeting with Ed. And Ed will tell you, because he's the manager, he can tell you what you can do and what you cannot do.
Hmm.
And so I went into, and it's the only time I've ever been at Ed's office. John took me to Ed's office, and he's like, first thing Ed says was like, those guys have money. They're not like us. They have a lot of money. Charge them a lot. And I was just like, oh, okay. And he's like, two. So you know, this is your first gig. Whatever, if you say a number and they say yes right away, you went too low. Next time, go 3 times higher. And always say it's negotiable. So when you give them a price, always say it's negotiable. And so this is business lessons from Ed, because he's the manager of the game.
Sure.
So and then Ed's like, so you can't use like the knee pads that we have. And he goes, but you can be yourself for it. You know, as long as you don't use, you know, you can't use our glasses. You have to use your own sunglasses,
Right, I see.
because you don't own the rights to your image. You know, and so I went ahead and I was like negotiated with Leaf, and I was like, crap, because I told him a number. I thought it was a lot, and he was like, yeah, no problem. And I was like, oh, and it's funny because next time I saw Ed, I was just like, you know what? I told him a number that I thought was a lot, and he said yes right away. And then he looks at me, he's like, what did I tell you? And I was like, next time, 3 times more. He's like, He's like, who's going to make the big bucks? And I'm going to make the big bucks.
As you put on your Johnny Cage shades, as you say that comment.
So Bloodstorm is actually related to Mortal Kombat, as a folklore. I think later on, because when I asked for my bonus and they said, do I have it in writing, which I didn't, because John and Ed just told me vocally that they were going to try to work for a bonus. I didn't want to work with them anymore. I was like, I'm going to quit. And they were like a little mad at me. And I think they didn't put my characters, they didn't put Johnny Cage, Scorpion, and Sub-Zero into number 3. They did, and then it didn't do well. And then they had to come back and do what was that called? They did the trilogy or something like
trilogy. Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, where they added my characters, but somebody else did them, because in reality, the upper management was really mad at me. Like, we're not going to use Pesina's characters, because we promised him money, and then we didn't want to give it to him, because apparently making hundreds of millions of dollars, there's nothing to share,
Which is sad, because as we said earlier, I think it's one of those things where. When we go all the way back to the origin story, you were essentially helping a friend, right? And there's a point where, and I've had this experience myself, where the friendship stops and the professional business starts. And I think, looking back, and obviously correct me if I'm wrong, at that point, if you don't set your cards out in terms of, hey, this relationship has now changed into something else. If you don't do that up front, then unfortunately you end up in a situation as you did, which is, you work incredibly hard and you're not rewarded for the amount of effort and the amount of exposure that you've given the company and the face of the business as well, to some degree. So, which is very sad to hear.
Well, to a big degree, because apparently they can use my idea to make it a mascot of the game. You know what I mean? To this day, you see Scorpion, it's like, come on, really? But I could too understand, like, and this is my opinion, I could understand people trying to stand up for you and other people saying, if you want to work in this business, you better be quiet. And two, I can understand John Tobias getting into trouble because we didn't work for Midway. So really our intellectual property is not, we never got paid for that.
Yeah.
Technically, they don't really own that intellectual property because we didn't, our contract never said anything like that. So again, it can't be, they don't want to mention it too much because then they're going to realize, well, some smart ass lawyer is going to call me up and be like, hey, they never asked you, they never paid you for all your intellectual property, all the stuff you came up with. No, like the staircase, like, when we talked about, oh, you saw a staircase. When I was jumping, John was like, you're jumping too high. The top of your head is going dark. Jump lower. And so I'm trying to jump, and John is like, you need to tuck your legs longer because it's too blurry. The motion is going to be too blurry to capture because it's too quick. Sure. So you need to jump low and tuck your legs up. And then I was just like, John, you want me to float? And John started laughing. He's like, man, he's like, he's like, I don't know what to do. I'm just trying to, we were trying to capture this. So when we were just talking, I looked around and I saw a staircase from a different game. And I was like, John, can you catch me jumping up? And then we cut it. I'll put the staircases. I'll tuck in the staircases, and you can get the descent from the jumping up part and jumping down. And John was like, man, that's brilliant. Let's do that. So we used that staircase for a lot of jumping because that was just out of that. Oh, do you want me to float? Oh, how are we going to solve the problem with the lighting? So it was just really. And today in their studio, when I see NetherRealm, I can see a staircase in the back that they use. I'm like, you're still using my ideas up to this day. You know what I mean? It's freaking 30 years later. You're using my ideas, but did you ever pay me for them? No.
No. It's one of those. It's one of those bittersweet moments, right? Where hearing these stories is obviously. I mean, for me personally, it's wonderful to even be able to talk to you and to hear these stories back. But again, the flip side of that is the negative side where you work incredibly hard, but your overall maybe not appreciation is the right word, but the overall what you don't get back what you deserve, right? I mean, I'm a person who's always believed that if you work at your hardest, you should be rewarded equally in nature. Unfortunately, in your case, and I've had this happen to myself, that isn't always the case. But I think the one thing that has stayed is your legacy of what you've left after all these years of still one of the most recognizable faces in gaming and given us some of the most wonderful characters in gaming is testament to your incredible knowledge and your commitment to make a vision of something that you carried on with someone else. I mean, that to me is just an incredible journey for me personally, talking to you directly.
Well, thank you, thank you. And it's not it's, and again, it's lessons learned. Anybody listening to this, as we said, if you're going in a project with a friend, make sure you get everything signed, because sometimes you get in a situation where it might not be in your friend's hands, or it might just be unclear.
Agreed.
Things are clear. Just keep the honest guy honest.
Yeah, agreed. One thing I was going to ask, actually, and it's an interesting one. Everybody who's involved in Mortal Kombat, I mean, you mentioned some of the guys with like Liu Kang and Kano. You guys still meet up quite regularly, from what it sounds like. Is that, well, obviously before COVID hit? Was it? Do you guys still like kind of meet up for things and stuff and interact with each other still?
I looked down at my phone because Kung Lao just called me on the phone. When you're talking, I got the call from Kung Lao.
How ironic.
Yeah, so yesterday I talked to Kano for like an hour, just talking, and 2 days before that I hung out with Liu Kang for the whole night. We did a podcast, and then we just talked till like 1 o'clock in the morning, just catching up, seeing how his parents are doing. Because again, the first main group, with the exception of Liz, knew each other way before Mortal Kombat,
right?
Before the idea of Mortal Kombat. So even Tobias knew Kung Lao and Liu Kang, myself, Kano, Raiden, way before Mortal Kombat. So that when John was like, he's like, who else can we get for cheap? And then I was like, oh, we could get these guys for cheap. And he's like, are you sure they're going to do it? I was like, they'll do it a favor for me, because I think this is going to be a really cool project, because we're going to be able to create this game. You know what I mean? We're gonna help you create this thing. It's not like we're hiring for an acting job.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, and in the end, I am known as the actor who plays. It's bittersweet, because I just kind of chuckle. I'm like, oh my god, you don't even know how much work is really into it. Again, I'm watching the game, and I'm like, oh, I came up with that idea. But they have like when we were doing it, John was like, I want you to lay on the floor like this, and we're going to put you on spikes.
Right.
And I'm like, first of all, if you're on spike, you're going to be bent over.
Yeah.
And two, I would not be. We're personalities. So when you kick me over, I'm going to be, you mother, and I'm swearing and stuff like that. And John and Ed are laughing, and John, as a joke, was like, oh, we got to film that. And then Ed looked at it, and he goes, you know what, we could really use that. So once in a while, we just show a top view of him like kicking and screaming. He's still fighting until the end, because it is a fighting game. So, and that's type of thing that comes in, and it's in the game. So it's kind of just like out of goofing around,
Very, very cool. Again, hearing these stories are just it's making me smile from ear to ear. I know people in chat who watch this back and will be like, "Can you stop smiling?" But I can't help it. So one thing I was going to ask, I did actually put a thing out on Twitter to actually get people to ask some questions. I'll ask the first one, which is quite hilarious. Which was, since the release of the movie, do you find yourself doing something boring, and then suddenly your brain goes Mortal Kombat out of nowhere? Because mine does, apparently. So yeah.
When I was talking to Rich Kano, he's like, sometimes it's a joke at work. They put the Mortal Kombat do 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 do, and he goes, and my coworkers come out like this, walking like this.
Amazing.
And then I was just like, Rich, I never get tired of the song. When I hear it, I never turn it off.
No,
I hear
agree.
it, it always kind of makes me, it just, and I was like, for me, it always brings back all those little stories of making it and how we were goofing around and how, you know, man, and I'm sorry to ramble, but you know,
Go ahead.
When John was like, I want you to shoot flames as a fatality. And I was like, no, John, I'm not going to do that. And John is like, why not? And I was like, if I shoot flames, my mask is made of cotton. It's going to go on fire and my whole head's going to be on fire and I'm going to be running around on fire. And then and then John was like, well, don't be a hole, pull the mask down. And then Rich was like, Rich is deathly afraid, even to this day, of skeletons.
Ah.
In the old Seven Voyages of Sinbad, when the skeletons came out, even to this day, he's like, "Oh man, that creeps me out." It just creeps him out. So Rich is like, "What if he pulls his mask off and he's a skeleton?" And I was like, "And his head is on fire." And then John is like, "Oh yeah, and he's blowing fire." And then we're like, "Oh man, that's so cool. Let's do that." So that's the type of thing that happened. Like how
That's
so
awesome.
when I see somebody performing that fatality, I just start smiling because I remember that whole story basically comes from me being a smartass, saying that no, I won't do this, just goofing around. Not that I wouldn't do it, but you know, we were friends, so we tease each other. You know, we played Dungeons and Dragons together, so you know how that is when you're on a campaign. You're always bickering. You're always bickering. We're always bickering. So stuff like that was how, you know, how we came up with special moves or things like that with that interaction.
And you still play D&D, and you're an avid comic collector, right?
I still collect comics. I haven't played D&D in a while. I used to go to my brother's house,
right,
and we would get together. So it would be a bunch of Mortal Kombat guys playing D&D.
I want to see that online because that sounds like a brilliant video waiting to happen to me. All in character, just sat around a table would be amazing.
Yeah, the Dungeon Master is the guy who did the first Mortal Kombat comic book in the Nintendo art. Andy is the Dungeon Master. Amazing. So he makes it really, really fun, and we were just kind of we'll just play the whole day and kind of it's like we're in our 20s again. You know what I mean? Amazing. It's just like we're all just kids again and just playing D&D or you know bickering and kind of goofing around and saying, oh, what if? Because the whole thing is we were always like a creative group. We'd be like, oh, what if this? Oh, they. You know, this movie had this, but they should make this out of this movie. Or, you know, what'd be cool if they can, you know, even back in the day, we were already, when we saw The Thing, they're like, oh, they have to have a part where we were making our own, talking about making our own movie, like prequeling the Thing. You know, and then years later, they come out with them, but we were just so, you know, so geeky. We were just, yeah, what if this or what if that or, you know.
That's awesome because I guess as you said, you know, when you're being surrounded by like-minded individuals, it's inspiring to kind of, as you said, bounce ideas off people and kind of innovate until you get this kind of really powerful end product. I mean, again, all I've got in my head is now Johnny Cage sat opposite Kano and everyone else just playing D&D, and it's that's a vision. An interesting question came out from Retro Sash. Actually, they said, "Were you happy with how Johnny Cage looked in the game? Was it what you were expecting in the end result?"
When we were doing, actually, it came out pretty much how well it could come out. I was really surprised because it really looked like me. And when we were doing when John was like, "Oh, I gotta, you know, I'm gonna do some shading here and stuff like that," and I was like, "John, don't change the face." And he's like, "I'm not gonna change the face. It'll be you." He's like, "It'll look like you." Because it's gonna be you, but you know, I need to change like color. You know, when you turn to make sure the shadows can tell the person what you know, get it depth.
Sure.
Because we're not capturing enough depth doing this. So when I first saw it like play, I was like, wow, it looks better than I thought it would look. You know, and naturally, it's the second one is much better because they decided to buy a professional digital camera. You know what I mean? A professional one. And two, John's dad owned the High 8.
Right.
So for a consumer, that's the best you can get. You know, and you know, you pay like $1,500 at the time for it, but it's not $30,000 camera.
Yes, indeed.
It's not. So the second one was like a professional camera, and you know, the colors came out even more like us. So, but yeah, I was really quite happy with the way it came out because I didn't think it would I was like, oh, it's not going to look like me. And in the end, it looks exactly like
Yeah,
me.
exactly. I think the one thing that always made me laugh was not the fatalities, but the nut punch. That used to get me every
Oh
damn
my
time. I've just started off a new story now, haven't I? I can just tell.
God. Because I filmed that nut punch about a dozen different ways, 50 times each. So I did it like I
Forward
did it like
splits,
this.
yeah.
How it turned out was the front split, but I did side split. I did it the other side. I tried punching this way, tried punching that way, and each time I'm sliding down into the split in different position, different splits. A couple hundred times in total.
Yeah, I can feel that. We
So
can stop talking
yeah,
about it now.
so the video actually there's a video out of me doing it. It shows Ed sprinkling uh, baby powder on the floor.
Ah,
And that baby powder is actually what I use on the rope dart to keep it slippery so it won't give you rope burn.
okay.
So when I did the splits a couple of times, I was like, guys, I'm not, your muscles get tired
Yeah.
because you can't go fast. You got to go down kind of slow. And I'm like, guys, my legs are getting tired. I've already done it 20 times. And then I was like, then they're like, well, rest. And I was like, rest is not going to do it. And then I was like, you know what? I got baby powder. If I put baby powder on the floor, I'm going to be able to slide into the splits.
Sure.
So I got the baby powder, and then Ed was like, you rest, I'll put the baby powder down, because we were all trying to do this and get this done. So, now there's a video of Ed sprinkling, and I get, what is that? Oh, that's baby powder from the rope dart, and that is Scorpion's weapon. And that was before that idea came out.
Wow.
I already had rope dart carrying out because I competed with that. And that was weapons that I carried around to practice with. So it's just that whole thing. But the split is, it was grueling. It wasn't like, oh, film it once, you're done. Like I said, a couple hundred times.
I did have a question here, but I can probably guess the answer already because I think we've kind of already touched on it, which is what character that you played as other than Johnny Cage is most synonymous with you as a person today? Can be any spect of a character and why?
Yeah, again, it's Scorpion and Sub-Zero. Are like when John told me that we couldn't do all the characters, that we're going to pellet swap one of the characters. He was like, and then originally the Lin Kuei was going to be the guy who did Kung Lao, but he dropped a weight on his foot the day before and broke his toe. So with a broken toe, you can't kick slow enough. When you kick fast, it turns out blurry, just like this. So you got to kick kind of slowish. That way you could capture the image. So he couldn't hold the kicks. So I was going in. So when I was doing that, he's like, you got two, but they have to look somehow different. When you're doing that. Besides that, he wanted like some kind of, he's like, when you do stuff, it has to be just a little bit different because they're brothers. Well, that wasn't yet, but that story came from me and Carlos. When John told me the news that there's going to be, that they're going to color swap, Carlos was told John, why are you so lazy? Just shoot another character. And it was a joke because there would be days that I would come in and John would be dressed in the same clothes because he spent the whole night working on the game.
Wow.
Because he was the main artist, but there was no one helping him. And there's 6 programmers,
Sure,
including Bet. There's Ed and there's 5 other programmers. And that's what we were talking about, unhidden things. Everybody thinks like, oh, Ed's the programmer. Ed was the main programmer. There's 5 other guys working underneath him, giving him stuff and creating stuff. And they put it all on John's desk. And then John is the only artist and he has to get all the changes done. So he would spend days like sleeping at the office. Wow. So Carlos teased him about like lazy. And then I started laughing. I was like, yeah, John. I go, you should just stay 4 days. Because, and then John was just like, you know what? These characters are brothers. And one brother, because we're Hispanic. I'm Hispanic. So we're kind of like that typical Hispanic where we're really like 50 million of us sitting at a gathering. We're close family. So he's like, and one of the characters kills the dad to seize control of the clan. And that brother kills the other brother who comes back as a demon. And that's how that conflict between Sub-Zero and Scorpion gave birth. From my brother Carlos teasing John Tobias about not working enough when he's spending days in the office or taking a shower. So with that, the Sub-Zero and Scorpion are really like, I was just like, well, how am I going to do this? How one has to be like really, really ruthless and evil, and the other one has to give the image or give the feeling like he's at peace, because the dad was going to give Sub-Zero the right to lead the clan, and Scorpion got jealous and killed the father, and then Sub-Zero, being the better martial artist, killed Scorpion. So at that time, that's the story. So I was like, how do I do this? So when I was just doing stuff, I tried to give it more of like a, when I'm doing stuff, I might tilt my head a little bit different, and I tried to. Kung Lao has a saying. Tony has a saying: personality in the pixels. Like when you play the game, you look at, there's something about the characters, and that's because behind it, we're trying to give it that energy. It's kind of like that. It's kind of like it is a performance.
Sure.
You get an actor who sucks, and you get an actor like, oh, that, when Robert De Niro steps on the stage, he commands it.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Or even Christopher Lambert. I love that guy. I'm so jealous that Carlos got Christopher Lambert to act like him. But yeah, the Highlander. Sean Connery. All those guys are legends. Have that personality.
Sure.
They command. So I think that because of our really deep study into martial art and our competitiveness, that comes across on the screen. So that parts of the personality, I think, have been ingrained into that. At least, that's how I feel about it.
No, sure, I totally agree. One interesting question, it's the last one, is from Steadysphere, and they ask, favorite moment working on Mortal Kombat?
Every moment was favorite.
I was expecting you to say that.
I mean, really, that's understatement, because there's so many stories, and that's why I'm going to try to finish this book up this year, is because there's so many, like, these stories are just some of the stuff that people don't know. We were working on a game like so much. One time we played dodgeball with Rich's shoes, because he was doing Kano and wearing them for 10 hours doing Kano. So he's like, my feet are killing me. He's on concrete and he's wearing these really thin shoes, and he takes off his shoes, and man, you could smell them all across the room. So I could smell them. So I grab the shoe and throw it at Rich, and Rich ducks, and it hits John in the face, and John's running around. Oh my God, I gotta wash my face. My face smells. My face smells. You know what I mean? And then John is throwing this shoe back at me, and I'm like trying to block, because we want to touch it, because it's not that Rich is smelly. It's like he has just been filming for 10 hours.
10 hours, yeah, exactly.
And Rich is like, he would sweat so much that we had to use regular glue to attach the Kano mask.
Wow.
So that's not like spirit glue. When we pulled that mask off for the day, it pulled skin off of its face.
Oh.
Stay on. But Rich was like, we got to get this done. He's like, get glue. And then John is like, are you sure? It's going to hurt when it comes off. And Rich is just like, no, we got to get this done. He goes, I'll deal with it when I pull it off. And so John glued it, like regular model glued it to his face. So stories like that, people don't really have. There's tons of stories like that.
It's painful enough getting super glue when your fingers stuck together. I can only imagine what that's like, having an entire half of your face with something being pulled off. Ouch. So coming on to kind of the end, I mean, is there anything you want to promote? I mean, you mentioned that you're writing a book, which I wasn't aware of, so I don't know if you want to promote anything or talk about any of your social media accounts. Go right ahead. Yeah.
Again, I'm trying to work on the book, and it's hard because writing is a skill that I'm not good at. I'm not a writer. So respect, if you're a writer, respect to you, because that's a difficult skill, because I look at it and I'm like, no, that's not really what I want to change. And so you change it, and all of a sudden you're changing the same paragraph so much that it doesn't make sense. So then you're like, oh man, I got to redo it. So it's difficult to do it, but I'm going to, look for that, and naturally, reach out to me. You can look me up on social media. Master D Pesina on Instagram. I usually do a lot of. I was the only one that bought a camera to Mortal Kombat 1 and 2. So most of the pictures you see of behind the scenes are like photographs that I own.
Ah, okay, that's interesting to know.
And there's a lot of photographs that I've never posted, never made public.
Ah.
So I'm just trying to figure out a way to get around. Warner Brothers not getting mad at me for posting, pictures of the making.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That fans would like to see, because that's interesting stuff. So sometimes I put them on my Instagram page or my Facebook page. Facebook is Master Pesina. Twitter, which I haven't figured out how to use, is also Master Pesina. My school is Master Pesina Martial Arts. Everything's because because of Mortal Kombat gave me that. I named the school before it was Chicago Wushu, which means Wushu means martial art.
Sure.
So everybody thinks it's a style, but Wushu actually means, when you say Korean Wushu, it could be Tang Soo Do. When you say Japanese Wushu, it could be Shotokan Karate. Brazilian Wushu is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. So Wushu is just a generic name for martial art. Wu is war, Shu is art, so war art. So Chicago Wushu was my name. I babble a lot, sorry.
That's right. This is what we're here to do. You're doing a great job.
You go to Master Pesina, you could look that up, and I'm going to be right now. I'm working on online lessons or online reference, meaning for me when I see I have such a high respect for artists. My brother is a graphic artist, but he knows some martial arts. So when he draws somebody kicking, it looks like when I see it, I'm like, oh, that it looks like somebody really kicking. Though a lot of artists when they draw somebody kicking, I'm like, well, that's not a like a real kick, and I used to play Street Fighter, and that used to be my thing with Street Fighter. I was like, it's not real. Nobody would throw a kick like that. You'd break your leg.
Do you know, I had a bet in my mind if I could go this entire podcast without you bringing up Street Fighter. You've done it right in the end.
That game ate a lot of quarters of mine, but I was just playing it and I'd be like, oh my God, that's not real. That's not a real kick. So I think I'm going to just try to do different things and show them like, this is like how we really kick, because there's a whole sports have taken over so much of the martial arts that there's techniques that are lost because that's what they're deadly techniques. So they're not allowed. You know what I mean? It's like a deadly recipe. So I want to kind of bring that back for people to kind of know. So that way, when an artist is going to draw something, they're like, oh, that's, you just don't hold your hand out and do a fireball. That's boring. You know what I mean? Like Johnny Cage's was modeled after, Fireball was modeled after Egg Chen from Big Trouble in Little China. I pulled magic from my demon bag, and then I threw it at the monster that came out of the tunnel.
Yeah.
And so when I came up with that thing, that's what I thought. I was like, oh, it's cool. John was like, think of something. And I'd be like, oh, Egg Chen, pull it out, 9 demon bag and throw it at the demon. And then John was like, okay, let's film that. So, different things came like from different, there's a lot of that. Yeah. So
that's so cool. I mean, I had no idea about that. Like, that's just like, I mean, Big Trouble in Little China is like one of my favorite films of all time. It was the hardest Blu-ray I have ever tried to get in my life for some apparent reason, especially in the UK. But yeah, I watch that at least once or twice a year. It still blows my mind. In fact, me and my brother used to have an argument about whether Raiden was the same character from Big Trouble in Little China, but it sounds like from what you've said, there is a heavy influence, which means, brother, I win. So there we go.
Yeah. John didn't. John said when he drew it after Raiden from Japanese mythology. But then when John was like, do this, Carlos did all of the moves from Big Trouble in Little China. So that way, John is like, no, it's not really, but Carlos is the one who gave it life. So he's the one who gave all the movements from Big Trouble in Little China. So it's kind of like a crossover, I guess. It wasn't originally designed like that, but because we were allowed to give it the personalities, Carlos really wanted that Big Trouble in Little China look for Raiden. So he gave it to him.
Awesome. Absolutely awesome. Well, it has been... I'm going to regret saying this because all my other guests are going to be like, hey, what about me? But you have absolutely been my favourite guest since I've had this podcast. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Just being able to speak to you has been the biggest honour of mine, and I'm sure everybody who will watch this and watch this on demand will agree that you have cemented yourself into gaming rhetoric for aeons to come for sure, and the product that you've helped produce is one of the finest, and may long it live in my heart. One day I will have an MK cabinet in this house. One day. Not your one, not the 10,001 one.
Yeah, right.
But one day, who knows? Yeah. But honestly, thank you so much for giving me your time. For everyone who's watching, if you do want to check out anything of Daniel's, there will be links into the description below. Stay on the line, Daniel. But from me, Machine Dean, thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to add at all, Daniel?
Just right now at the recording of this time, it's weird, very weird time. So remember that we're all gamers, we're all geeks. Help each other out, show some compassion, and the respect you want to get, you have to give in order to get it. So take care of each other, because one day I want to be next to you playing MK, and we'll see who wins.
Oh man, that's a challenge. I've always wanted to come to Chicago, and I think now I have a very, very, very good excuse to come out there. Here's to the future. Anyway, stay on the line, but from me, Mean Machine Dean, thank you so much for your time. Right, Mean Machine Dean, sign out. Thank you very much.